Make sure we're recording for everyone. My name is Sherry Sanderson, and I am the library director here at the Boulder Junction Public Library in far northern Wisconsin, where we have a lot of snow and a lot of cold. I'm not sure where everybody else is joining us from today, but hopefully some of you might be somewhere warmer than we are. You are attending one of the Boulder Junction Public Library's winter wellness programs. Our Winter Wellness Series is a series that offers informational presentations to help patrons learn ways to support their health and wellness this winter and all year long. This is our third year of offering winter wellness programs, and for the safety of our patrons and staff this year, all these programs are being held online using Zoom, which is actually nice because then they're open to everyone, even those that aren't in Boulder Junction at the time. I am recording this program so that if anyone misses it or wants to watch it again, it will be recorded and put on the Boulder Junction Public Library YouTube page. We are going to allow question and answer time throughout the program. We don't necessarily have to wait until the end of the program. If you have a question during the program, you can type it in the chat box, and I will either read it to Dr. Vanderwall, or we can have you unmute your microphone to ask the question yourself. So Dr. Vanderwall is willing to allow people to ask questions throughout the program and have a more interactive conversation. With that being said, I want to give a warm welcome to Dr. Cassie Vanderwall. Dr. Vanderwall is an advanced degreed clinical dietitian with proven experience as both a leader and a team member at a top U.S. academic medical center. She is an accomplished healthcare professional, instructor, and researcher with a passion for disease prevention, wellness, and empowering individuals for better health. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Vanderwall, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you share your screen so everybody can see your slides.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present today on nutrition throughout the life cycle. As Sherry shared, my name is Cassie Vanderwall, and I am a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, and certified personal trainer. Our time is going to be spent exploring good nutrition, but starting with what health and healthy eating might mean to you and how these definitions differ. We're going to compare and contrast nutrition needs from birth to older adulthood. And by the end, I hope that you feel confident that you know how to build a healthy meal and snack using evidence-based principles for energy balance. And before we depart today, I hope that everyone can identify one SMART goal to move towards a healthier lifestyle or to really solidify or sustain some habits that you've previously established. So I would like to start by examining what health and healthy eating are. Health and healthy eating are terms that are used every day in our households, but they mean different things to different people. And therefore, I think it's very important to lay this foundation that what I describe as health or healthy might be different for you. So for some, health is described as being free of illness and disease, an overall well-being that encompasses everything from mental well-being to social well-being to physical, emotional, being physically able to do what you want to do, or functioning well even with chronic disease or illness and with age-related limitations. It's important to note that we can be healthy in whatever state we're in. Similarly, healthy eating and the definitions for healthy eating vary greatly, but most will agree that eating safe, quality, and nutritious foods, foods that are high in vitamins and minerals and fiber, would equal healthy eating. Eating a variety of foods to maintain health, as you've described it previously, or simply seeking out ways to provide energy for good health and healing. What healthy is not is it's not a size. We as a society have learned to associate certain body types with health, but we really recognize today that you can be healthy at every size. And therefore, healthy is not a size, it's rather a lifestyle. A healthy body, a healthy mind equals a healthy life. And it truly is health that is real wealth and not pieces of gold and silver. So this is the foundation that we're starting from. And what I hope is that all of you seek out information from what I'm going to share that fits into whatever your definition is, recognizing that nutrition truly is an individualized science. Some things that are consistent, though, is that health can change over time. We recognize that one's ability to move or their mobility may change over time. The body composition, so how much water our body has, how much lean mass or muscle and body fat changes over time based on that mobility, but also just based on the age-related process. As we get older, our metabolic rate changes. It often decreases, becomes slower, and this is tied directly to body composition. As we have more muscle mass, we need a higher metabolic rate to sustain that. The more active or mobile we are, we have a higher metabolism. And again, our water content, how hydrated our body is really dependent on these three aforementioned factors as well. So what can we do? We can't stop aging. We haven't discovered the fountain of youth, although there are many products and people that tell you that you can. What we can do is we can increase our knowledge. I truly believe that knowledge is power. Once you have an awareness, you have the power to change. We hopefully have the ability to eat well. Again, safe, quality, nutritious foods that are at our fingertips. We have the ability to move or exercise within our abilities. And I hope that you feel empowered to practice healthy habits. So lifestyle change for lifelong health includes these three tenets: eating well, which we'll describe shortly, being active, and healthy habits. Healthy habits is the sustaining piece of these other 2 points of the triangle, but it also includes social well-being, mental well-being, sleep, substance use or abuse, and many others. Sorry, I was pulling up the chat box to make sure that I could monitor it. I saw the little blink. And when we sustain these facets of lifestyle change for lifelong health, what happens is that we either prevent, manage, or control diabetes. We prevent or manage our heart disease. We decrease risks of developing cancer and preventing reoccurrence. And we promote bone and joint health for a lifetime. So why do we do this? Why is this topic important? Well, unfortunately, nearly 40% of all deaths in America result from heart disease and stroke. And these are attributed to our habits, whether we smoke or not, how much we move, what we eat and how often we eat, and alcohol misuse. So this is why we're having this conversation today. What I also hope that you come away with is that there are a lot of different ways that people can achieve quote unquote health and however they define it. And what I hope you understand is that there are ways that are founded in evidence, and there are ways that may not have as such strong evidence. And these fad diets or false advertising methods are going to be incorporated in today's presentation so that you understand why they might not be the most sustainable method for good health. Because unfortunately, again, just like there's no fountain of youth, there's not a silver bullet for sustained change. It really requires a commitment to your health and well-being. So we're going to start with that first point on the triangle, eating well. First, we start with the basics. What is a calorie? Is it something to be burned, a unit of food energy, or approximately 4.184 joules? Well, it's all of these things. It's the fuel for life. And it's important to note that energy varies by the macronutrient. We see that carbohydrates and protein offer us the same amount of energy per gram, but fat has twice as much energy per gram. And this is the rationale why fat was targeted for many, many years in diet culture. Because if we cut out fat, we cut out twice as many calories as carb and protein. And therefore, carb and protein started to have this halo effect. Not many people talked about alcohol, but alcohol has become more in the spotlight in recent years, especially with this new set of dietary guidelines for Americans that were published just last month. So the takeaway here is that the way that we compose meals and snacks will really dictate how much energy and the type of fuel we're giving our body. So we're going to take each of these macronutrients one at a time and explore them. First, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates have been the target of a lot of criticism in the recent past. It seems as though in the diet culture, fat now has a halo, but people aren't big fans of carbs. But carbohydrates are the main form of energy for our body. Yes, all carbs are broken down to sugar, but it is that sugar, that glucose, that everything from our red blood cells to our brain to our muscles use as their primary energy form. What's important to note is that there are different types. There are these simple carbs, these quick carbs, and those are simple or quick because that's how long they take to digest. Then there are these complex or starches or whole grains, and these are sometimes called slow carbs because the fiber within them slow down the digestion and thus they can support more sustained or even energy levels. So fad diet alert, Atkins was really popular recently. Why? Because of the rapid weight loss that people see when they restrict carbohydrates. Why doesn't an Atkins diet work over time? Well, the body needs at least 150 grams of carbohydrate every day to sustain brain activity, heartbeat, breathing, digestion, AKA life. Atkins diets now have kind of even become more extreme into keto diets, where people are restricting carbs to just, a handful, maybe 5 to 10 grams every day in order to enter ketogenesis, where you're utilizing ketones as your primary form of energy. So this may be helpful in the short term for promoting a healthier weight, as one would describe one. But again, over time, it is not sustainable. Additionally, another fad diet that you might hear about, or this principle or philosophy that's incorporated into other healthy eating messages, is glycemic index. This is quite popular in the diabetes community. And what it's based on is that carbohydrates are digested at different rates. So things with a higher glycemic index are those that are easily absorbed and digested. These are going to be your simple or your quick carbs. But why it doesn't work is that simple carbohydrates like fruits and some vegetables can be very nutrient rich and great sources of natural energy. So how do we enjoy carbohydrates in a healthful way? Well, we really would like these to be incorporated as half of everything we eat by choosing quality carbs, things that provide a complex source of energy, which means they have fiber and they're digested slowly. These could be things like whole grain breads, oatmeal, brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat pastas or bean-based pastas, whole fruits and vegetables, and low-fat dairy. If we choose these foods to make up our carbohydrate part of our plate, it will really help us to achieve the 25 to 35 grams of dietary fiber that the American Heart Association says that we need for good digestion and overall heart health. I'm going to move on to protein now. Protein. It is really what makes up the structures of life. It's the building blocks. It makes everything from our muscles to our hair and hormones. What does it do? It supports our immune system, enzymes. Enzymes are things that help to break down our energy so that we can use it throughout our body for whatever our activities of daily living may include. Again, hello, Atkins diet. With the Atkins diet, protein really got a health halo. They found that high protein meals induce satiety. That means they are satisfying for a longer period of time because of their impact on hormones. And therefore, if we shift our plate to have more protein, we reduce the intake of carbohydrates. Again, that promotes that quick weight loss because we're dehydrating our body. But again, why it doesn't work? Well, some protein sources are high in fat, which we'll get to shortly, which can increase our risk for heart disease. But also, too much protein can increase uric acid in our body and increase our risk for gout. They can also dehydrate our body, again, from the absence of carbohydrates leading to dizziness, dehydration, constipation when we don't have that extra fiber. Additionally, too much protein doesn't magically become more muscle. Too much protein, just like too much carbohydrate or too much fat in our meal plans, really does lead to excess energy. Excess energy is eventually stored as fat in our body. So what do we do? How do we enjoy a moderate protein diet? Well, we strive for at least 10 grams of protein at every meal. Research supports the consumption of 10 to up to 25 grams of protein at every meal provides satisfaction. Again, changing the way our hormones handle that meal to help keep us full until the next meal or snack without tipping the scales. It also provides enough energy on our plate from protein where it doesn't impact the other food groups. When we're looking for good sources of protein, we're looking for those that are lean, and that means they're lower in unhealthful fat. This includes lean beef, skinless poultry, fish, some lean pork sources, bison, venison, other vegetarian sources such as fat-free, dairy, or soy milk. There are an assortment of milks these days, and most of them provide a good source of protein. Other options include kidney beans or nuts or seeds. Those plant-based sources are rich sources of vitamins and minerals, protein without the concern of unhealthful fats. So the last macronutrient, fat. Fat, as we discovered in earlier slides, is the most dense form of energy. And oftentimes it has a bad reputation. But because of keto diets and Atkins diets, it's changed over time. Fat really is essential, though. It helps the body to grow and develop, as we'll learn when we talk about early childhood nutrition. It also helps to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. So our vitamins A, D, E, and K can't be used by the body unless there's a medium of fat to help them be absorbed. That's why putting a little salad dressing on your salad is actually really helpful for making sure that you're able to absorb and use those vitamins. And then, of course, we know that fat also helps to cushion our organs and our cells, especially in our youth. But there are different types of fat, just like there are different types of carbs. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good guys, you've probably heard of. Those are our omega-3 fatty acids, those polyunsaturated fats. So this gets into chemistry a bit, but fats that are unsaturated are flexible and fluid because they don't have double bonds. These are things like safflower oil, soybean oil, sesame seeds, nuts and seeds, and monounsaturated fats. Again, they're also flexible fats. The monounsaturated, or you might hear them called MUFAs, are very high in the Western diet. These are things that are omega-6 fatty acids. And although these are both good for our health, we have to be cautious of the ratio. We know that there are certain communities around the world, such as those that are centurions, right? Communities where individuals live into their hundreds. And we've found that in those communities, individuals have a very high ratio of polyunsaturated fats to monounsaturated fats, meaning that they consume much more omega-3 than omega-6. That is not true in the Western world. In our Western diet, we consume many more MUFAs than we do those PUFAs. The bad fat would be the saturated fat. And again, it's more solid. It's solid at room temperature and has this rigid structure that increases the risk of solids in our body, or atherosclerosis, the scarring and the buildup and the plaque in our vesicles. Saturated fats come from animals such as lard, butter, fatty meats, dairy, and plant sources, including palm oil, coconut oil. And then the ugliest fat of all is trans fat. It's these unsaturated, these good guys that have gone bad. They've been transformed into rigid structures to promote sustained shelf lives. These are processed foods like pies, vegetable shortening, stick margarine. When you look at the label, these are those hydrogenated fats. So which food is a good source of healthy fat? So if we look at this list, we can really pinpoint what's probably highest in each of them. Packaged pie crust is going to be high in trans fat. Beef, assuming it comes from a commercial source, not grass-fed beef, is going to be quite high in saturated fat. Walnuts are going to be high in polyunsaturated fats, or omega-3s, and soybean oil is going to be higher in monounsaturated fats than poly. So the answer, walnuts, would be the healthiest source of fat on this page. So overall, when it comes to fat, we want to choose heart-healthy ones, the good guys, the fluid ones. We want to do our best to keep saturated fat low. And the American Heart Association says less than 10% of everything you eat, which if we look at what most people have is around 20 grams or less per day. If an individual has high cholesterol or has a risk of heart disease, they might keep their saturated fats a little bit lower. We also want to keep trans fats minimal. And this again helps to decrease risk of heart disease. So Judy asks, what will be the difference in fat content and type between commercial beef and grass-fed beef? Well, we have heard in the past that most grass-fed cows have a higher profile of omega-3 fatty acids in the meat. Therefore, grass-fed cattle tends to have more omega-3s and less saturated fat than commercially fed beef. And therefore, if you're willing to pay the higher price tag, is a healthier option. Next, we'll transition into high priority micronutrients. So we talked about macros, carb, protein, fat. Now we're going to talk about micros. And these are micronutrients that are consistent throughout the life cycle, starting from birth all the way to older adulthood. We're going to start with iron. There's a lot of talk about iron, but that's because of its strong role in anemia or red blood cell health. Children between the ages of 1 and 3 are at highest risk for iron deficiency anemia. This has a little bit to do with that picky eating phase, but also because of what we've termed as kid-friendly foods. Most kid-friendly foods are quite low in iron, unless it's fortified. Independent of age, we want to encourage a diverse and variety of iron-rich foods. It's important, though, to note that there are 2 types of iron. There's iron that comes from animals, which is heme iron. That's what you see in that first bullet point. And it's more bioavailable. All that means is that it's easier to absorb and use in the body. And it's highest in meat, poultry, and fish, specifically dark meat poultry. Then there are non-heme sources. These are sources that are likely plentiful in plant-based diets or vegetarian diets to be sure that individuals following these dietary lifestyles don't increase their risk for anemia. And rich sources of iron include nuts, beans, vegetables, and fortified grain products. What's important, though, is that vegetarians need almost 2 times as much of non-heme iron as those that eat meat. And this is simply because of phytates, things that are naturally occurring in plant-based foods that really compete for iron. Oftentimes in plant-based foods, iron is high, but so is calcium. And calcium really fights for the absorption at the same site as iron. So what can be helpful is if someone's following a plant-based diet, trying to decrease how often they have meat, but still wants to make sure they're getting adequate iron. Every time they have a plant-based source of iron, it can be really helpful to have something that's high in vitamin C. So for example, if they're having a rich, let's say spinach salad, maybe they throw some beans on there and they have some sunflower seeds on top. They have a rich source of iron. They make sure they put their dressing on it, but maybe it's a citrus dressing, or they squeeze a lemon on top. That additional vitamin C can help to make sure that that iron gets to where it needs to be, and they absorb all the vitamins A, D, and E, and K. Other high priority nutrients throughout the life cycle are calcium and vitamin D. And I list these together because they are necessary. They work hand in hand. They're partners in crime. We know that calcium is needed for the mineralization and maintenance of bones, but it's also other structures too. It's really important to supplement, especially in children during the bone building phases, but it doesn't have to come from dairy. If someone is lactose intolerant or has a dairy allergy or simply doesn't like dairy, They can achieve high calcium from the assortment of alternative milk and milk products, or from nuts, seeds, and dark leafy greens. Vitamin D is much more difficult to acquire through food choices, but it's so necessary for calcium metabolism. Therefore, supplementing with vitamin D3, especially through the long winters that we encounter here in Wisconsin, can be really helpful for maintaining good health. Because we know vitamin D is not just important for our body and our bone, it's also helpful for our immune system. Other high priority nutrients include zinc. Zinc is one that is lesser known and isn't talked about as often. Unless someone's had, for example, a bad wound or a pressure ulcer, they probably haven't been told to supplement zinc. But zinc is so essential for growth and brain development and immune function. Individuals that follow a well-rounded diet, including proteins from animals, usually don't have a problem achieving their zinc needs. Zinc is bioavailable or available within grains and plant-based foods, but it's much lower than those animal foods. So if someone is shifting to more of a plant-based diet, which is fine and acceptable and really is touted for good health, they just need to be more cautious and careful of making sure that they get adequate zinc. So let's take a moment and put all this together. You likely have seen this plate. And this plate can be super helpful because it shows us how all those macronutrients fit together. The benefit of this plate is that it also articulates calories or energy needs and adequate portion sizes. So this plate is supposed to be an 8 to 9 inch diameter plate. One piece of homework is to measure your dinner plate when you are at home. See how long or wide it is. What's the diameter? If it is 8 or 9 inches across, then you know that if you divide it up into essentially quarters, you'll be enjoying the appropriate serving size of grains, protein, fruits, and vegetables. So your grains will likely be a half a cup to a whole cup. Your protein will be 3 ounces or the size of the palm of your hand. If you choose to put an apple, it'll fit nicely into that top left corner. And your vegetables will have room to cover 1 to 2 cups of your plate. And when we do that, when we eat that way, we will provide a satisfying meal for our stomachs and our mind, but also making sure that the energy that we're taking in is sustainable. It's going to promote energy that rises and falls in a very consistent way throughout the day, independent of which foods we put on our plate to satisfy those food groups, which really provides that individualization of how you describe healthy eating that we touched on earlier, and really helps to account for cultural, religious, and health differences in how we eat. So what does a healthy snack look like? Well, composition or how we put food groups together for snacks can be just as important because it really helps to bridge the gaps. A few years ago, eating every few hours was really touted for good health, but that's when people were ideally taking these snacks, right? So we'd have 6 small snacks every day, but it was described as 6 meals, which really wasn't helpful because it usually led to more energy than our body needed. But when we interject meal, snack, or 6 snacks every day in these proportions, it can really help to balance both appetite and good health and support a healthy metabolism. But the composition of those snacks is really important. We want to make sure that we're pairing energy, again, carbohydrate, which is listed in those little C's on the left, with protein or fat. And again, this helps to make sure that the energy in our body is broken down in a very consistent way as our energy rises and then falls. It also provides a rich nutrient source for those vitamins and minerals. We can't move on without talking about alcohol. We know that substance use has increased greatly during the pandemic. And excessive intake, which is usually around 15 drinks or 15 servings of alcohol a week, increases the risks for cancer. And when combined with smoking, increases these risks dramatically. We also recognize that alcohol changes our inhibitions, right? We've learned this from a young age, and it can trigger appetite and lead us to overeat or make food choices that we're not proud of. So it's important to recognize alcohol recommendations. which is moderation. What's moderation? It's 1 drink per day for women and 1 to 2 drinks per day for men. And 1 drink is described as either 12 ounces of beer, 6 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of liquor. Always making sure that we drink plenty of water to replenish our dehydrated body while we're drinking. And I always get the question, well, can I add these up? Can I just not drink 5 days a week and then, drink 10 on Saturday or Sunday? No, not how it works. So it's daily moderation. So now we want to put this together in real life. Oh, how much water is plenty? Great question. So we had likely have heard 8 cups of water per day. So if we do 8 cups, that equals 64 ounces. Well, oftentimes that's not enough for our body, but it's a starting point. So identifying how much water you're currently drinking and aiming for 64 ounces is a really good goal. Another way to look at it is to try and consume a milliliter of liquid for every calorie you consume. And that is another way. So if I follow a 2,000 calorie diet, I would want to consume 2 liters of water every day. And 2 liters of water is going to be that 8 cups of water. So it's about the same. If you consume more calories, you're going to need more water. If you're more active, you're going to need more water. Again, it's an individualized science, but that's a great question. Another question is about frequency of eating and the practice of eating less frequently to decrease insulin resistance. So I don't bring this up here, but intermittent fasting or changing how often we eat or when we eat is very popular right now to combat insulin resistance. There is some evidence to suggest that in the short term being like 3 months, that when people start to delay eating or reduce their eating to a certain window, such as they only eat 8 hours a day and they fast for 16, that this gives the body the ability to catch up, if you will. So elevated blood sugar or high blood sugar is really the effect of having too much energy on board and not having adequate insulin to move that energy into our muscles to be used during activity. Essentially, what happens over time is if our blood sugars stay high, insulin rises to meet the occasion. And then eventually, if blood sugars continue to go high, insulin can't keep up. And I like to describe it as going on strike. It resists. Insulin is now resisting, kind of just says, I can't keep up, I'm not even going to try. And blood sugars continue to rise and rise to levels until we have diabetes. Oftentimes, if you're concerned about diabetes or prediabetes, your doctors will assess your insulin levels. And we can often see insulin resistance in the level of insulin before we actually see diagnosed diabetes in terms of impaired fasting glucose, so high fasting glucose, or changes in your hemoglobin A1C, which is that kind of 3-month marker of where your blood sugars have been. So back to the question, if individuals reduce how often they eat and they're only eating in an 8-hour window, fasting for 16, and they truly decrease how much they're taking in, meaning they're not following a 2,000 calorie pattern and just fitting those 2,000 calories into the 8-hour window. Now they're only eating 1,000 calories a few times a week. They do see decreases in insulin resistance and changes in diabetes, simply because your body has, again, time to catch up. It's not getting as much sugar put into it, and therefore it can handle the sugar that's currently on board. So I hope that answers your question. So now I want to turn us to the nutrition facts panels, because remember, knowledge is power. What we're able to do with the information around us will impact our ability to change if we want to. And nutrition facts panels can be quite confusing. When they started to put nutrition information on menu boards, many people didn't know what to do with it. It was like, okay, sure, I see that that has more calories than that, but I don't know how many calories I need. So what I encourage people to do is not always look at the calories, but when we're navigating a nutrition facts panel, it can be most helpful to really start up here at the serving size. I'm going to annotate here. If we don't get this right, then what happens is we lose the ability to truly identify how much we're eating in that food. So if I have 2/3 a cup of whatever this is, I know that I'm getting 230 calories, but more importantly, I really want to focus in on those key macronutrients that we talked about: saturated fat, trans fat, and fiber. When I'm evaluating what's in that 2/3 cup, I want to make sure that it's low in saturated fat, low in trans fat, and higher in fiber. Because then I know that the fuel that I'm taking in is sustainable and healthful. The same is true when we're drinking beverages. We're not sure what this is, but we know that there are 2 servings per container, or 2 cups, and that can easily be considered 1 serving in the American culture. So we have these 2 columns. We're just going to assume that this person, is going to enjoy the whole thing. I don't know why it's letting me stamp. There we go. So we're going to take in the 440, the 2 cups. And what we notice is that it's much higher in saturated fat, twice as high, right? As well as twice as high in fiber and added sugar. So what I encourage people to do is figure out what your goals are for yourself. If you're at risk for heart disease, saturated fat, fiber, and added sugar are going to be those things that you really want to zero in on when it comes to the food label. It can also be helpful to set goals based on individual food choices that help to make sure that at the end of the day, you're following a pattern that's low in saturated fat, low in added sugar, and high in fiber. So what those goals are include keeping foods that are daily foods, again, those green light foods, to less than 3 grams of saturated fat per serving can help make sure at the end of the day, you're around that 20 grams of saturated fat that promotes good heart health. If we choose foods with more than 3 grams of dietary fiber per serving of carbohydrate, then we can make sure that we're meeting that 25 to 35 grams per day. And then finally, sugars. Added sugars are really the culprit, not total sugars, because we know there are naturally occurring sugars from fruits and dairy that we want to make sure are part of our dietary lifestyles. It's the added sugars that creep up on us. And we would be best to keep our added sugars less than 24 to 35 grams per day. And we can do that by making sure our foods have less than 8 to 10 grams per serving. Another way that we can think about good principles for health are trying to aspire to eat the way that communities that have longevity eat. You likely have heard a lot about the Mediterranean diet, but I've changed this up, and so is the literature, to support a Mediterranean style of eating, because the Mediterranean region eats very differently depending on where you land. And because of immigration and acculturation, they eat much differently now than they did when this original research was established. But I think we can still pull key principles from it. The first one is we want to achieve daily exercise, right? So if we're thinking about Mediterranean style health, incorporating physical activity and exercise into what we do is very important. We also want to found and ground what we eat in plants. Plants are nutrient rich, they're high in fiber, and they're able to provide a strong foundation for our fuel needs throughout the day. And then as we move up the pyramid, we want to be more sparing. We want to be cautious of the types of protein we choose and making sure that we get adequate vitamins and minerals. And if we're going to enjoy alcohol, enjoy it in moderation. Bringing us back to where we started to talk about health and healthy eating, we really want to personalize diets. We want to pull them apart to make them work for us. There really isn't one size fits all. And healthful patterns really consider an individual's chronic health needs, their culture, their chewing and swallowing abilities, their mental status, their pleasure, and their quality of life. All right, we're going to take a break from the point of the pyramid and start to talk about being active. This is likely a refresher for many of you, but knowing that activity just like healthy eating, has different parts. When one aerobically exercises, they get their heart rate up. It's pumping, and it promotes good cardiovascular or heart health. The American Heart Association supports 30 minutes of aerobic exercise each day, which doesn't have to be done in all one time. It can be broken out into 10-minute intervals. And things might include walking, stair climbing, swimming, dancing, jump roping, whatever it is that gets your heart pumping and is enjoyable and sustainable for you. We want to balance these heart pumping activities with resistance exercise, because if you recall from the beginning of our presentation, those age-related changes really hinge on how much muscle mass or lean tissue we have in our body. So increasing anaerobic physical activity or strength building exercises decreases the loss of that lean mass. And it can be as simple as just designating 2 days a week to just do some strength training exercises. It can be done with dumbbells like pictured here, or cans of soup or milk jugs or whatever you have around your house. And ideally, we would want it to be head to toe. So find some upper body lifting, some lower body presses, and some core exercises. That will help to maintain good strength and mobility throughout life. So what do? How do we do this? We aim to be physically active for a total of 30 minutes every day. Maybe it's 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes after lunch, and 10 minutes in the evening. Finding a buddy or an accountability buddy, someone to hold you accountable and make it fun, can be really, really important. And recall, if you're just starting, it's so important to be intentional about everyday activities. How can you make them just a little bit longer? Once we return to the stores and running errands and things like that, can we park a little longer? Can we walk to a neighborhood place? And be sure to always check with your doctor. So as we start to summarize, I want to capture what's different about these. In early childhood, we're really trying to maximize growth and encouraging a growth rate that is quite quick in early years. From birth to the first year, a child's weight triples and then quadruples after 2 years. And then we see this from age 2 to puberty. Kids truly grow as weeds. And our priorities are to achieve optimal physical and cognitive development, to maintain a healthy growth trajectory, to really form a positive relationship with food, develop healthy and appropriate eating habits, and to really combat emotional eating or eating for reward, and encouraging a platform for regular physical activity. We recognize that there are certain groups of children that are more at risk for nutrient deficiencies, or what we call malnutrition. So being aware that low income with limited food access can really increase one's risk for low iron or anemia and malnutrition. Plant-based diets at a very early age can change one's relationship or understanding of food, and often limits their micronutrient availability if they're not done carefully. We also recognize that use of cow's milk before 12 months can increase risk for iron deficiency, and more than 24 ounces of cow's milk later on in life increases one's risk of iron deficiency as well. And then depending on one's health consequences or chronic diseases, it also changes what's available to them in their growing body. We also recognize that picky eating and problem feeding are different, right? So some people establish some habits when they're little that might carry forward through an older adulthood. But what's really important is that we need to recognize that picky eating is just a common phase in childhood. What we need to be careful of is if it turns into problem feeding. Problem feeding is when an individual will only eat fewer than 20 different foods, and this doesn't resolve after 2 weeks, or if the child gags or melts down when trying new foods. These are when we need to involve a referral to a specialist or our doctor. The other ones will come and go, just like other phases of childhood.
Dr. Vanderwall, you do have a question in the chat box.
Thank you. So in terms of exercise before or after eating, what I usually tell people is that the science is mixed. I think that individuals should exercise whenever they will get the best workout, whenever you feel like you are in the best frame of mind, the most energized, and when you'll be most engaged in that activity, because that's what's going to allow you to use the most fuel, have the most fun, and keep it happening day after day. These are some steps that I don't want to spend too much time on how to really help support children or adults who have a fear of trying new foods. And it's a very slow process that happens over several months to familiarize themselves with these new foods. And it can be really helpful to, getting someone to try a new vegetable. But it certainly doesn't involve force feeding or making someone chew or swallow. As you can see, it often incorporates play into just simply familiarizing themselves with one food, touching it, licking it, and then eventually in those steps 6 and 7, putting it in their mouth. So now let's jump to older adulthood. What's different for older adults? Well, malnutrition is on the rise. So just as we were prioritizing growth and development in children, we are really trying to prevent the breakdown in older adults. And currently about 25% of older Americans suffer from poor nutrition. And this impacts their health, their healing, and their independence. And unfortunately, malnutrition is often overlooked, which is unfortunate because it's reversible. Causes of older adult malnutrition include changes in our sensory. Our vision may change, our smell may become more faint, our ability to taste flavors is limited, and therefore we desire stronger flavors, more sour, more sweet, more salty. There might be changes in appetite, difficulties with chewing and swallowing. If individuals had some changes in weight, maybe their dentures no longer fit the way they should, and that impairs their oral health as well as their ability to eat without pain. We know that medications can change nutrients and appetite, and one's ability and cognitive abilities, including memory loss, impact their ability to eat well. Physical signs of older adult malnutrition include changes in body composition. Bones might become more visible, eyes may look sunken, there's just this lack of energy, fatigue, their immune response may be more poor. We see changes in skin, and again, exacerbated changes in memory or other brain functions, including mobility. So what do? Well, we really look at these 4 facets of care to prevent and combat malnutrition. Promoting good food, right? Convenient, nutrient-dense foods. Using herbs and seasoning to really help to heighten flavors without salt. Encouraging hydration and healthy snacks that are, again, convenient and easy to eat. Making sure that individuals are connected to their medical care and have access to a registered dietitian as needed. Making sure that food is safe, not only in terms of the expiration date, but can someone chew and swallow it in a safe manner, that the textures are safe. And finally, we find that communal social activities really help to prevent malnutrition, whether it's a shared meal or shared experiences around a meal, communal meals, meals on wheels, all of these resources can help to combat malnutrition. So again, we're going to end on something that is consistent, and this is one way to bring it all home. So as we start to think about what am I going to take away from this presentation, what's one thing I want to continue to do or do differently, consider this equation for good health, which is 5-2-1-0. The 5 stands for 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables. We really want to reduce or eliminate foods and beverages in our households that compete with healthy food. We want the healthy choice to be the easy choice. And we can do this by increasing variety, our exposure to new foods, gardening when we're able to. We can clean up our home food environment by kind of using these swaps, if you will. What are the foods that really are tempting? What can I say goodbye to make room for a new food? Using the go slow, whoa approach, what are green light foods for you? What are yellow light foods? Those foods that you want to enjoy on a weekly basis versus a daily basis. And what are those whoa foods? Whoa foods are foods that may be too tempting to keep in the home, foods you might have a bad relationship with, or foods that you know just aren't good, so you got to keep them out of reach. Here are some go slow, whoa ideas. You can see that first category is green, the second one is yellow, and the third one is red. Swaps, these are some foods that you may say, it's time to say goodbye to that Raisin Bran. and bring in maybe just plain bran flakes with your own added raisins. Time to say goodbye to French fries that are pre-fried and try air fried or oven baked fries. Saying goodbye to potato chips and hello to whole grain crackers. Moving on to the 2, this gets at physical activity. Independent of age, we really don't benefit from more than 2 hours of recreational screen time every day. This ties it back to the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations for kiddos, but it's true that even in adults, too much screen time impacts our sleep. We get different messages from the media about who we are or what we should be enjoying. And there's definitely a dose-response relationship between unhealthful conditions or chronic disease and the number of hours of TV watched. So how do we combat that one? With 1 hour or more of physical activity. For children, it's really 60 minutes every day. For adults, it can be 30 to 90 minutes that are needed to manage and prevent chronic disease. A good starting point, though, is that 30 minutes every day or 150 minutes of every week that the evidence tells us if we achieve that, we will change our biochemical landscape. We will be able to use the excess energy and revamp not only how our heart uses energy, how much our muscles are pumping and building, and in just enjoying life. We know that in physical activity, we also can bolster and support our mental well-being. And this can be through structured, like organized, quick, intense, regular physical activities like exercise, or it can be free play. Again, it's just dancing. It could be other activities of daily living, like again, taking the stairs, parking further from the store, dancing while you clean, vacuuming, mopping, gardening, all of the above. And the final one, the 0, sugar-sweetened beverages are really a hard habit to break, but a really strong source of added sugar. And in one drink, we can meet our needs for added sugar for the day. And added sugar can be sneaky. It's not only in these sugar-sweetened beverages, but it's in our salad dressings, our cereals, our tomato sauce, our breads, it's everywhere. And therefore, it can be really, really difficult to cut the habit, but really beneficial once we do. So change is ahead, or sustaining change is ahead, and it's never too late to make lifestyle behavior changes. We recognize that consistent small steps can lead to the big changes that people often desire. If we make SMART goals, goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So now we've reached the end. So what's one thing that you will take with you or do differently or continue to do today? Which commitment can you make today? What is your SMART goal? And at this time, in our last few minutes, I'm happy to take any questions that weren't yet answered.
For all of you joining us today, you can either unmute yourself to ask a question, or you can type a question into the chat box. So if you know how to unmute yourself and you have a question for Dr. Vanderwall, go ahead and do it. Or if you are more comfortable with it, you can type the question into the chat box.
Well, while people are thinking.
Oh, there we go.
There it comes. How much can you rely on vitamins to complete your dietary needs? That's a great question. So I encourage people to think about vitamins and minerals as supplements, because that's what they're called, right? They're supposed to supplement an already healthful food choice and pattern. There are times when we know we need supplements. So for example, as the body ages, our ability to digest and absorb vitamin B12 really decreases. We make less acid in our stomachs, which means we make less what's called intrinsic factor to absorb and use that B12. So in those cases, we definitely need a supplement. And all supplements or all vitamins and minerals are not created equal. I generally encourage people to read the labels, just like we do our food choices. The U.S. Pharmacopoeia is an organization that certifies good manufacturing processes of our supplements to make sure that we're getting them from an accredited company, to know that they're putting things into those supplements that are supposed to be there and in the amounts that they're promised. So your multivitamins that have the stamp that says good manufacturing practices or certified by the US Pharmacopoeia, you can be really confident that those are providing what you need. It's those other supplements that you can't trace back that can be of great high risk because they might contain ingredients that you don't want in your body, or they may not provide the ingredients in the amounts you're looking for. Do I have a website for the US Pharmacopoeia? I do. So let me change my view just real quick here, and I will put it in the chat box. The US Pharmacopoeia website as well has a list of accredited companies, which can also be quite helpful. Happy to take other questions while I find this for you all. All right, that will get you all started. Well, in our last minute, I want to thank you all for your time and attention and great questions and engagement. And I wish you all well on your journeys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vanderwall. And I'm going to share my screen for just a second here and show everybody what is coming up in the rest of our winter wellness series. So today we had our presentation with Dr. Cassie Vanderwall, and next Tuesday at the same time at 2:30, we are going to be on Zoom again. And our guest will be Jeff Kirsten, the agency liaison with the Bureau of Consumer Protection within the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. That is a mouthful. And he's going to be talking about identity theft, protect, and prevent. And you say, how does that have to do with wellness? But your financial wellness is just as important as your physical and mental wellness. And then on February 23rd, again at 2:30 on Zoom, we are going to have a local resident, Dottie Reeder, and she's going to be talking about mindfulness. And I didn't look up how to pronounce this. I'm gonna guess Qigong. I should have looked it up ahead of time. So again, I want to thank Dr. Cassie Vanderwall for that awesome presentation today. A lot for us to think about. I know for the rest of the day, I'm going to be trying to eat much better now that I've heard all of this. And I want to thank everybody that joined us. If you missed part of the presentation, I know some of you came in at the very end. I am recording this and it will be put on the library's YouTube page, possibly later today. And to find our YouTube page, you just go to YouTube and search Boulder Junction Public Library, and there it will be. So again, thank you again, Dr. Vanderwall. I see there's messages in chat just to make sure there's no questions before we close that. Looks like just a lot of thank yous. So no more questions. I'm going to close this and say goodbye to everyone. Goodbye, Dr. Vanderwall, and have a great day, everyone. Stay warm.